Tyrese Haliburton does it again as the Indiana Pacers come back and win Game 1 of the NBA Finals by a final score of 111 to 110 over the Oklahoma City Thunder after trailing for the whole game. We will cover this Game 1 historic comeback by the Pacers on this episode of the Flame Entertainment and Sports. Alright guys, so to start off this Game 1 recap of the 2025 NBA Finals, where we saw the Indiana Pacers complete an epic comeback to beat the Oklahoma City Thunder 111 to 110 on a Tyrese Haliburton game winner, just like he did in Game 1 of the Eastern Conference Finals in New York against the Knicks. Haliburton does it again, and the Indiana Pacers, they were trailing this whole entire game. This was their only lead, and it was the most important one of the night as they take home the win. So yeah, to get into my thoughts on the early part of this game, we can start off with the first half of the game. So it was an interesting game to start off. Oklahoma City, they were firing on all cylinders, specifically on the defensive end. Indiana wasn't really able to, get a lot of open opportunities, open shots. It was very hard for them to drive into the paint. They converted the most turnovers that they've had throughout this whole 2025 NBA postseason, as they had 9 turnovers in the first half. With all that said, the score at halftime did not indicate that the Thunder were so, on fire on defense. It was a 12-point lead at halftime for the Thunder. And honestly, yes, Indiana kept making turnovers throughout that first half, but ultimately, I kept like keeping track, right? I was like, man, they keep making turnovers, but I would look at the score and I was like, wow, but somehow they're still in the game, somehow they're still in the game, Someone I want to shout out, it was a rough start. He came off the bench for Indiana, Obi Toppin. His first 3 possessions of the game were turnovers. I feel like most of that was due to, just some butterflies, some jitters. First time in the finals, and then ultimately in the second quarter he started turning things around. I believe he hit 2 threes in the second quarter, and then even to finish the game, Obi Toppin was just so good. On our preview, I mentioned Obi Toppin and TJ McConnell as 2 key role players who have been doing a hell of a job throughout the whole playoffs for Indiana. And yeah, McConnell's another guy I want to shout out. He was able to keep this Indiana team within the game in the first half, in my opinion, offensive wise. Like Indiana, yeah, we'll get into Indiana's defense, but yeah, I specifically wanted to start off with Obi Toppin and McConnell. I feel like they're the 2 rare bright spots on offense in the first half for Indiana. And then something else I want to talk about that led to this comeback win for Indiana starting in the second quarter. I want to give credit to their coach Rick Carlisle. I thought Coach Carlisle did an incredible job. He adjusted at the start of the second quarter on defense to full court press, and ultimately Indiana's defense, since he made that adjustment for the rest of the game, they finished very strong. And I would say their defense was just as good as the Thunder defense was throughout the whole game. But yeah, I wanted to make sure to credit Coach Carlisle on that. It takes a lot of guts, right? To, 1 quarter into this game, right? After 1 quarter to adjust. Ultimately, I talked about it in the preview as well. Last series, Rick Carlisle showed the ability to not be hard-headed and to not only adjust, but to know what to adjust to. That made sense. And, last series, it was all the guys he played, right? He played basically the whole roster. I believe 13 or 14 guys played in that Eastern Conference Finals against the New York Knicks. And then ultimately here, the beginning of the second, like I said, he switched to full court press. And you could tell that the Pacers defense just went up a notch. And yeah, ultimately, that defense competed to the very end. Indiana came out on top. As for the Thunder, though, in the first half, like I said, defensively, they're hitting on all cylinders, firing on all cylinders, whatever that saying is. But ultimately, I felt on offense, I was never fully bought in or impressed at their overall offense. Like, there's some individual shots and stuff from SGA. Jalen Williams had a couple good moments. Off the bench, Aaron Wiggins had a couple good moments as well. Hardenstein, Chet, they got a couple of baskets near the paint. But ultimately, I never saw the Thunder fully take off in that first half. And ultimately, that's why Indiana continued to stay in the game, because although they're not, fully hitting on offense because of that adjustment, like I said, like Coach Carlisle made in the beginning of the second quarter. It allowed Indiana to stay in the game. Another guy I'll shout out this time from Oklahoma City, though, that was, to me, firing on all cylinders on all aspects of the game, including offense, was Alex Caruso. from start to finish, he was tremendous. I mean, him and TJ McConnell, I mentioned on our finals preview, they're two of my favorite role players in the league, and I've wanted them on the Heat for a very long time now, and it was just a joy to watch both of those guys battle in the finals, man. And yeah, shout out, to TJ McConnell, right? First finals game, and he looked completely locked in from the get-go. But now to get into the second half, so like I said, the first half, it was a historic defensive performance by the Thunder. They caused 9 turnovers. Indiana hadn't committed those amount of turnovers in a half throughout the whole playoffs, so obviously that was super impressive. But yeah, so ultimately Indiana, beginning that second half, we didn't see a clear indication that they're fully back on offense, if you want to call it that, in terms of like the third quarter, really. But we saw glimpses here and there of improvement, and then we saw the Thunder, they continue to have the lead in the game and continue to do what they did in the first half. But ultimately, even in that third quarter, we didn't fully see them take over the game completely. And that makes sense. Like the lead never really got out of hand to a super extreme extent. If that makes sense. Like I feel like their biggest lead was maybe like 16 at one point. But ultimately, the Thunder just kept doing their thing. Being great on defense and offense. It was just kind of, like I said, it was kind of individual stuff. Like Shea, he had his moments here and there. But I felt like overall, as a total team offense, they're never fully able to put it together. And someone I want to shout out who had a great second half, actually, another bench guy for Indiana. I didn't talk about him on the preview, but he was on the Heat last season, and this season we traded him to Indiana. That's Thomas Bryant, the backup big. I mean, what a job by Thomas Bryant. Something I always loved about him in his short time with the Heat was that he always gave it his all. And we saw that tonight. And not only did he give it his all and do all the hustle plays and things that don't get pointed out on the stat sheet, but tonight he also added to the stat sheet. He had a couple points on offense, including a big-time 3. He just provides great energy under the basket. Last series he played a pivotal role in their win against the Knicks in that, Eastern Conference Finals. Yeah, tonight it was like, I felt like Obi, TJ, and Thomas Bryant were just doing their thing. So yeah, let me open up the box score here just to give you guys a little picture in terms of the numbers. So here, the first 2 quarters of the game, so OKC won the first quarter 29-20. Indiana was able to cut that down in the second quarter, and OKC won that one 28-25. Ultimately, the final 2 quarters were won by Indiana. In the third quarter, they won 31-28, and in the fourth, they won 35-25. So ultimately, Indiana was finally able to, put it back together. I already shouted out 3 road guys who I thought did a pivotal job in keeping them in the game offensively. Now I want to shout out some starters as well. One guy who really took off in the second half and was one of the lead catalysts in my opinion. And it started out with not necessarily with his shot making, but mainly with his aggressiveness and assertiveness. And that's Andrew Nembhard, the young guard there for Indiana. I thought he showed so much aggressiveness and poise in that second half, and he very much was one of the main starters that kept them in the game. I also want to shout out Miles Turner. I felt overall he had a terrific game, especially against 2 7-footers, and Chet Holmgren and Isaiah Hardenstein. Turner ended with 15 points and 9 rebounds, which is absolutely amazing, and 3 blocks. But yeah, I wanted to make sure to shout out Nembhard. Then Siakam, I felt like throughout the whole game, he was kind of off. He would have his moments here and there, but ultimately, when it came down to it in the fourth quarter, he very much stepped up. And then, Haliburton, right? He was like the question mark, and the one throughout the whole game, people were kind of questioning because he was doing good, right? Like making shots, passing the ball, and defensively he was doing good, but he wasn't really attempting a lot of field goals. So that was really the concern or the main topic, right? Everyone was talking about. And then ultimately, to make it short and sweet, not make it too long on this game 1 recap, with 0.3 left, he made the go-ahead basket to give Indiana their first lead of the game. Indiana made the final stop in the final possession by the Thunder, and they win game 1 after trailing the whole entire game until 0.3 left, which is absolutely incredible. So yeah, guys, it's going to wrap up our game 1 recap. Once again, congratulations to the Indiana Pacers as they complete a historic comeback, defeat the Oklahoma City Thunder 111-110 to capture an early 1-0 lead. Game 2 will be occurring on Sunday night on ABC, so make sure to keep it locked in here to the Flame Entertainment and Sports on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and keep up with us as well on social media, on Instagram and TikTok at the Flame_ES. If you guys want to give us your thoughts on this game 1 win by the Pacers, anything you're looking forward to in game 2, make sure to, send us your thoughts. And yeah, guys, with all that said, till next time, everyone, take care.